For today's review, we are looking at Superboy Prime. Now, before I dive into talking about the accessories and the figure, as usual, let's take a quick look at the data profile card that is included. And once again, this photo for the card is action figure photography, and the source material is Infinite Crisis. On the back, his real name is Kal-El or Clark Kent, and it reads, an alternate reality version of Superman, Superboy Prime comes from an Earth where the DC superheroes and supervillains were fictional characters, until the day his powers were activated and he became his world's sole superhuman. But after his planet was destroyed in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, he became unhinged over time and eventually clashed with the superheroes of the main DC universe in the Infinite Crisis event. Ultimately, Superboy Prime was defeated and imprisoned in the Source Wall, the barrier that surrounds the universe, only to break free when it was destroyed years later. However, when another crisis threatened all of reality, Superboy Prime proved himself a hero once again and helped save the DC Multiverse. And that's a pretty good read-up on who this character is. And now, let's talk about the accessories that are included with this action figure. This is once again one of those cases that we have seen plenty of times in this line where the figure itself does not come with any accessories at all. So there's no interchangeable hands, no alternate head sculpts, no effect parts, nothing. All you get in this box is just the figure, the data profile card, and surprisingly a flight stand, which is quite nice here because we have seen cases where they have made figures based on characters that do have flying as a superpower, but they don't give them the flight stand. They give them just the regular DC figure stand, which is quite lame. So in this case, at least you do get the flight stand. But that doesn't justify the fact that this box is pretty barren. In this case, this figure would have benefited if he did have at least 2 sets of fist hands if you want to get him into some action poses. But you can't even do that because, well, the only hands that he has are just these hands, which are not good for action poses at all. So it's quite limiting to how you can pose this Superboy on your shelf, which is quite unfortunate. Alright, let's talk about the aesthetics of this figure. So one thing that you will notice that is very present throughout the design of this figure is the fact that he does have a lot of yellow tubing attached to certain parts of his armor, and it's just present throughout the entire body. And it looks quite familiar, does it not? Well, of course it should look familiar, because we looked at a figure not that long ago that had a very similar design. And of course, it is the good old Anti-Monitor. Now, I have never read the comic where this version of Superboy Prime came from, where he has this sort of suit. I don't know what this whole thing is. Does it mean that he's using the power of the Anti-Monitor? Maybe, but I do like the overall aesthetics of it because this was during a period where a lot of the supervillain designs tend to have this sort of detail, where they love adding these sort of tubes into the design of their costumes to make them look like they're no longer human or something. And that's exactly what's going on here, right? So I do like that. His S-Shield is pretty cool. I like the matte finish here with the red and the black being a very smoothed out paint. That's pretty cool. And in terms of his face sculpt, it is a really good face sculpt. I like this. It could work for a younger Clark Kent. Now, the only problem I have with this head sculpt is that he does have those side eyes. And for clarification, this figure is quite old. It came out like many years ago, and this was during that period where Mcfarlane just loved making side eyes for a lot of the DC figures for some reason. And as you know, one of the biggest problems with this line is that there are no alternate head sculpts, right? Like that has been one of the biggest problems. So during this period, a lot of people were not happy, including myself, because side eyes are terrible. They're just looking off to the side, and it sucks because if you're trying to pose him in some sort of action pose or something, he's never looking straight forward. He's looking to the side, and it just looks weird. So this is the one problem I have with this figure. Now, I've seen people fix this problem through some custom DIYs where they did realign the eyes by painting it and changing it, but you know that requires a lot of work. So Yeah, one thing I didn't like about this period are those side eyes, and I'm glad the side eyes were removed, because people complained enough and they were well aware of this issue being a problem, so this is why we stopped seeing side eyes after. But yeah, there's that. And in terms of the back part of the figure, he does have this nice red cape that is made of soft plastic, and it is connected to this armor piece up here. And one thing about this armor is that it is supposed to be metal or silver, right? But as you can see, it's not exactly the best sort of colors. So this is one of those cases where if you do have a metallic marker, you could probably make it look better if you do have this figure, of course. I don't know if you can still get this figure right now because it's not that expensive from what I remember. Like, it never really sold out, so maybe there's still a chance that you can get this guy for pretty cheap. Who knows? So yeah, but that's pretty much most of the aesthetics, right? It's mostly just his costume, but he has like these metal armor parts on him. So yep, that is basically all the details that are present, and of course he does have abs. Just one last detail to point out. And since we do have the anti-monitor here, I might as well just put them next to each other. Let's just get this comparison out of the way first before we show all the other comparisons later. But as you can see, they do work together pretty nicely on the shelf. If they are based on what I'm assuming, this armor is supposed to be. It's supposed to be infused with the anti-monitor's powers. Then yeah, these two definitely could go together, right? So there is this comparison to start it off. And now let's talk about the articulation of this figure. So let's start with the head sculpt, of course. If you're trying to get him into a flight pose, that is not going to happen because this neck joint up here is not the best. He doesn't want to look up at all. And his head runs into the back of the collar here for his, upper armor piece. In terms of looking down, that's not an issue at all. In terms of turning left and right, he's going to run into the collar piece. In terms of tilting, no issues. So the head articulation is quite limited, which is unfortunate. In terms of his arms, he can spread them upward, but because these tubes are connected to his arms, you do want to be careful because if you're using too much force, they might break or something can happen. And this armor piece right here is connected to the armor part up here. So in terms of swinging upward, that's as far as it's going to go. You're not going to be able to get his arms to swing all the way back like this. Well, you can do it like this, right? But what I mean is that you're not going to be able to do it the right way because of the armor piece becoming a hindrance to his arm articulation. Swinging back like this, that's not a problem, but getting the full 360 spin, that's where you'll run into some issues. He does have a upper bicep right there with the articulation. He does have double jointed. But of course, when you double joint this, you do want to be careful. And since this figure is much older, you can see that he does have the older style ball joints, which are not the sculpted ones that we get nowadays. But they do swivel and they do have wrist articulation. As for his torso, he does have articulation there. As you can see, rotation is not a problem, right? That's good. Leaning forward, not the best. Leaning back, he can lean back okay, right? So there's that. In terms of his waist, it does move, so that's good to see. Does it lean forward? Not exactly. It leans back really good, but as you can see, there's like a gap right there in the waist, so that's not pretty. So leaning back is probably the best thing that he can do, but leaning forward is just not happening at all. In terms of his legs, so as you can see, these tubes run down to the bottom part of his legs down here. So again, you want to be careful when you articulate this. If you're getting him to do some sort of split, he can do a pretty good spread right there, right? So that's not a problem. If you want him to kick out, that's as far as he's kicking those legs out, because this piece up here does hinder the articulation, which is unfortunate. In terms of double jointed legs, you can get that to work, no problems. In terms of articulation in the feet, they do move a little bit. There is swivel and there is toe articulation. As for the upper thigh swivel, they do kind of move, so they're not completely frozen, which is good. And that's pretty much all the articulation on this figure. All right, let's move on to comparisons, and let's bring in some figures to compare him to. And let's start off with, of course, Cyborg Superman, based on his new 52 appearance. And as you can see, he is much taller than Superboy Prime, but they do work together really nicely on the shelf, and I do like this. Here he is next to the Eradicator, and that also works as well, so that's cool. And of course, here he is next to Steel. So as you can see, my quote-unquote Reign of the Superman shelf looks very wacky because these 3 figures, or 4 figures in total here, are not based on the same source material at all. And also, this is not Connor Kent, so that makes it even worse. But that's what I'm working with, all right? So there is Steel. Here he is next to the Eradicator that we looked at last week, the shiny one, as I like to call this one. So he has to use the figure stand because he likes falling over all the time, which is quite unfortunate. But there they are. And of course, the last comparison... Oh, that figure fell, but that's fine. The last figure that we have to bring in, of course, is the Silver Age Superman. And there you have it. Both versions of Clark Kent in different universes. Pretty cool. All right, and that's going to do for the comparisons. If you found today's review of Superboy Prime informative, give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, it would be much appreciated. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.